Hey guys, welcome to our video. We're going to jump on in with our EQ, which is what was the cause and effect of Prohibition back in the 1920s. We're going to start with what is Prohibition. And Prohibition is referring to a time period in US history from 1920 all the way through 1933, a 13-year period where we banned the sale of alcohol in the United States. And one thing I like to do to remember what prohibition is notice that in the word prohibition is the word prohibit, or to stop or not allow. And that's what we're talking about here. We're not allowing alcohol to be sold during this time period. And what makes prohibition legal is an amendment or a change to our Constitution called the 18th Amendment. And that very specifically outlines that making or producing alcohol, transporting it, shipping it from one place to another, and selling it to a consumer is illegal during this 13-year time period. So one thing to note here, and what people sometimes confuse, is that the actual act of drinking alcohol was not illegal during this time period. So right before Prohibition goes into effect, you see people stockpiling their liquor. They buy as much that they can get their hands on, and they keep it because drinking itself was not an illegal activity. Okay, so why did America try this epic experiment? Earlier in class today, if you were with us, you looked at this political cartoon on the left. It's called The Drunkard's Progress. And in it, we looked at different segments that pieced together this story of what happens to people when they drink a lot and become drunk. And ultimately, the cartoon is suggesting that women and children, so families, are the ones that suffer from the actions of the drunk husbands. And so what we're seeing in the United States at this time is a ton of family-related problems. Men are going out spending the money they earn at work on drinking, and families are left behind. Tons of divorce rates go up. Kids are not being taken care of. And in general, we see a lot of poverty and a lot of crime during the time period. And so people start to push back, and they want to preserve those traditional family values, and they identify alcohol as sort of the cause of all of these social ills and social issues. And that is why women begin the push to ban the sale of alcohol during this time period. And so we'll talk about some of the characteristics and effects on these next couple of slides. And I just ask that you take note of these in that last box on your guided notes, because there's a lot of effects that were the results of this banning of alcohol in the US. So the first was, just because you ban something doesn't mean people will stop doing it. And none is more evident than the emergence of speakeasies. So a speakeasy is a secret bar where you could go and illegally purchase alcohol. Sometimes speakeasies were hidden with like secret doors with other establishments. If you were here earlier, we talked about how you might need like a club card or ticket to get in. And others operated in pretty much plain sight. But there were places, if you knew where it was, you could find alcohol to purchase in a speakeasy. This also led to the flappers, which we have talked about, young women in this time period, started behaving and dressing in different ways. Women would go to the speakeasies, dress differently, drink, which was not typical or not expected from women at the time, and start to change the social culture. And again, just because something is illegal doesn't mean people aren't going to find a market. Prohibition led to a huge increase in organized crime, right? We're talking the mobsters back in the day, most notably Al Capone, pictured here. He was the leader of what was called the Chicago Outfit. He ran Chicago. He illegally sold alcohol during Prohibition, and we would call that a bootlegger or bootlegging. He had all the connections. He and his organization would bring alcohol from Canada down to Chicago. He would find buyers and sellers, and he kept this illegal market continuing while the official policy in the US was that alcohol was illegal. And so the last thing is, you look around today, we know, of course, alcohol is not illegal. This experiment doesn't last long. After 13 years in 1933, Americans get pretty sick of the situation, and we ultimately decide to repeal or get rid of that 18th Amendment, which bans alcohol in the United States. Prohibition is ultimately a failure. Crime rate, organized crime goes through the roof because the demand still exists. And when the demand for a product still exists, laws are broken, and ultimately the law was thought to be redundant and it was retracted or erased. And so those are some of the key effects of prohibition. That is it for me, guys. Take a look at the screen. Should look like this. And you're going to move on to the beer baron clip from The Simpsons. I think y'all will enjoy it. It's pretty silly. All right, thanks for listening.